right now, but it's not.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch, Serman, and I am so happy to have you here with us today on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those who want to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we are going to look at different life cycles, and we're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because your personal finance, believe it or not, are usually not about the money. They really are more associated with the emotions that you have around your finances. Although we might be somewhat general, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out. You can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Or you can post comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or wherever else you're hearing this. Today, we're going to be exploring the positive divorce movement. And I just got to say, just that concept should have people turning up the volume to hear more, because it really is a revolutionary idea in the divorce world. And I have to say as well, it is a great one. Gabrielle Hartley is a leading online mediator and divorce attorney, has an incredible reputation for settling at the table, which is what you want to do, and stay out of court. Before opening up her own practice, she clerked at the matrimonial courts of New York City. She has resolved hundreds of high conflict divorces. She is an author of a program and a book called Better Apart, The Radically Positive Way to Separate, which has attracted attention from Gwyneth Paltrow, from People magazine, and from others. And the slew of media outlets that have pursued her to be on New York Times, New York Post, US News and World, and in about 40 minutes, I can say even the Financial Wellness Hour. So I am thrilled to have you here, and I got to say this is somebody who is an expert in the positive divorce space, which is unique. I think it's really a new movement, if I can call it a movement, and Gabrielle is unparalleled in this area. So I am thrilled to have you here, and thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm always happy to spend the morning with you, Hirsch. So
I got to tell you, it's a little nerve-wracking having you after reading that bio, or at least sharing your bio. But I am thrilled to have you here. And
I'm nervous after you shared the bio too. I don't know if I can live up to it.
Our conversations, I think, have always been lively when we've spoken, and you know what? We're just gonna have a discussion. You've got so much to share, and we both have years of experience, so I don't think there's anything really to be so concerned about for either one of us. But before we jump in, I am going to ask you just to share a little bit about your background. It's always nice for people listening to understand where you're coming from, where do you focus, things like that, if you don't mind taking a minute or two on that.
No, I don't mind at all, Hirsch. So how did I get to the positive divorce movement? When my brother and I were 9 and 6, our parents divorced. It was the early 80s, well before anybody had shared custody or had nice divorces. It was like the era of Kramer versus Kramer, if you remember that.
I do remember that.
And, at the time, my parents were often talking about, what a great divorce they had. And I didn't really recognize what a good job they were doing until in the early 2000s, I began clerking for Judge Sunshine in New York City in the divorce court. And it was there that I realized that divorces are typically really awful. It was like they really lived up to the hype of everything that you see on television and everything that you hear on TV. And I just thought, it shouldn't be this way. And that's where I started to formulate in my mind what later became the Better Apart method, which was, a way to navigate forward and through your divorce in a more healthy way. So I really wanted to launch something. I think we might have lost Sherm here. So that's okay. There you are. It's okay. I was just continuing to talk, Hirsch. Could you hear me? Maybe.
Yeah, no. You were just the focus. And
I thought I lost.
We're going to pop in and out. Don't worry.
Okay. So anyway, the point is, divorce doesn't have to be terrible. I realized this after working in the court and seeing how the process stirred up so many problems. And it really wasn't necessary. So I started to break down to say, okay, what's going on here? And I realized, which sounds super obvious, that, you can't make good decisions when you're having emotional upset. And so there, at the time when I started to work on Better Apart, there really weren't many books out talking about a mindful way to navigate forward.
Right.
And I just had in my mind, like, I wanted to be the Gloria Steinem of the positive divorce movement. I wanted to, I didn't want to be Gloria Steinem, but I wanted to be like someone who, served and supported and gave permission to people to feel good about themselves. I had this whole, sort of narrative put upon me that I was from a broken home. I really resented that. My home wasn't broken. My parents were fabulous. And, they were together, even though they were apart, they were actually better apart. Thus the name Better Apart.
Right.
And so taking it a step further, so when I left working for the judge, I started my own practice, and I really, I pride myself in being able to close like any case. But in addition to that, I also train professionals in this closing practice, which you can also use in your everyday life to get along better in difficult situations.
I love what you're saying, because something that's always amazed me, I've been kind of in the divorce world, if I can say that, for about 7 years now, almost 7 years. And people always talk about it being a failed marriage. But when we go to work at a job and we leave, we don't talk about that being a failed job. Right. It was kind of done. We maybe learned all we could through that, and now we moved on. And that, I don't really understand that, and as you said, everyone's kind of heard about divorce being nasty, and unfortunately, many people have experienced it being nasty. So introducing you as a sought-after expert in the positive divorce space should obviously grab people's attention. But I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit more what you mean by the positive divorce movement, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I first and foremost, I'm not an advocate of divorce. Like, if you have to get a divorce, but even in all my work, I always talk about ways to stay together, ways to reshape the relationship. Even though sometimes it's hard, my husband and I have had our share of bumps in the road, to say the least. And, that's just how life is. And sometimes, though, it's better to move on. And if it turns out that it makes sense for you to move on and for your family to move on, your narrative, your story that you tell yourself about your life, over time, as you work through the grief, can still be and should be, I hate the word should, but I'm going to use it anyway, should be positive, right? And because not only for you, but also for your children's sense of who they are. Because if you view yourself as less than because you had a failed marriage, the biggest decision in your life was a failure, right? Now, how is that going to translate to your kids?
Right.
It can't be good. Trauma is only trauma if we experience it in a negative way. There's a lot of talk about the ACEs, all those traumatic events that happen and inform how the rest of our life unfolds. The reason that we want to look at things differently are layered. Some of it is for ourselves, to feel good, to be able to step forward, have better relationships in the future, figure out, where, pray tell, were you or where were we complicit in our failed relationships, right? Because it's so easy to get involved in that blame game.
Absolutely.
And so it's not all about like thinking everything's hunky-dory. As I said when we started, my parents were always talking about how great their divorce was. I guess they're sort of the inspiration of the positive divorce movement. I was their kid. They never went to court. They didn't fight horribly, but they fought horribly sometimes. It wasn't a big trauma. It was definitely not great, in that I was often looked at as that I was from this broken home and that sort of thing. But if the outside world started to view it differently, I think that we would start informing ourselves differently. And so the reason that for me, the reason I, coined the term, the positive divorce movement, is because I want to start really shifting the global conversation of what it means to have a marriage not last a lifetime.
Yeah, I love that concept, and you can look at it as an opportunity in many ways. The very first blog I ever wrote, I actually called it "Divorce is Awesome," right? And I got these kind of weird looks like, do you really want to call it that? So I changed it to "Perspective is Everything." Yes. So that's actually the name of it now officially, I guess. With that said, the idea was, in the beginning, I thought my life had died an excruciating death until I really saw there was opportunity in this. And I kind of run through a top 10 list of, these are the positive things that can come out of it. And one of the big ones is reconnecting with yourself, where you spoke about kind of looking at yourself as a failure, or everything, your major decision as a failure. There are really things that come out of this that are so positive, or can be, but to your wording earlier, like a little bit of deliberate approach to it, that deliberate, we're going to make this a positive experience, as opposed to, this is the worst thing that could happen. And I think that perspective really can make things happen, and people get divorced in their 20s, they've got 50, 60, 70 years left to live. If that's how they're starting their adult life, it's not going to be a fun life. But, if they look at it as, well, okay, I can learn from that and really grow from that and make the rest of my life amazing, it really changes the whole perspective and the whole discussion.
I love the word perspective so much. It really, I think of Wicked whenever I think of the word perspective, that show. It's all about perspective. So when I start a mediation with people, I know before they come to the table that each party is going to say they just want to be fair, right? Like if I had $100 for everyone who wants to be fair, I'd be very, and so I start my mediations before anyone has had a chance to say anything, just talking about fairness. What does it mean? And that I assume that both people want to be fair, and that each person's sense of what is fair may be vastly inapposite to what the other person is saying. And that doesn't mean that they're not being honest or truthful. It just means they have a different point of view.
Right. And, I like that so much, because I think people sometimes go into the procedures, whichever one they go down, but mediation is quite popular. It's very popular. And they, sometimes want that pound of flesh because I've been wronged or whatever. And you never really get your pound of flesh. You never feel better about it.
Gold at the end of the rainbow.
Exactly, right? But being able to work through it and have somebody set the plate for you in that way, like, this is how we're going to go about this. You may come in with a little bit of a different perspective. Everyone sees things differently, right? But we're going to work on being fair. We're going to work on a healthy dialogue, which is one of the things that I was amazed. I'm a trained mediator as well. That's not where I practice, but one of the major things that was amazing to me was, it's not my job as a mediator to come to the solution. It's yours still. You still need that control. I'm just going to facilitate, and I'm simplifying it, I know this. I'm going to facilitate a healthy conversation to help you guys get there. That's a very different approach to walking into the room and it's going to be chaos and a war, And when you're in those situations, emotional, scared, you're not making good decisions financially. You're not making good decisions emotionally. And it's quite a destructive environment to be in, obviously, as opposed to having someone like yourself move you through the process, reducing, de-escalating a lot of that stress. I think that's huge. I love that.
And just, in the mediation process, unlike the judge who hears a tiny little sliver, you're just sitting there talking. You're just at the table. I mean, you're at my computer, really, right? So we're just three faces. And if we need to have breakout rooms, we have breakout rooms. But we just cut through the crap. Part of my my language. We get to where we need to go. I start my mediations always with clarifying what the goals are. What are the goals for the mediation? What are the goals for you, for your life? What are your personal goals? Because that way, when things start to go off track, we can always go back to what the goals are, right? And another thing is, although I've done many 40-hour mediations, including I recently just did the Mostyn Guthrie 40-hour, I just like to keep doing retraining to learn more and more. When you're trained as a mediator, they instruct you to just let clients arrive at all their solutions. But I know from 25 years of mediating that sometimes, having seen people don't know all the possibilities. First of all, because they're emotionally flooded, they can't get there. And second of all, because they've done maybe 1 or 2 or heaven forbid 3 or 4 divorces, whereas I've done probably, over 1,000 divorces. So they're talking in circles. And as the mediator, I never tell them what to do, but I may suggest something. Have you considered this? Here's another way to look at that, right? So your mediator can really also help things go in a positive direction. Now,
go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Finish.
I don't want anybody to hear that I'm saying you can't go to court. Sometimes you have to go to court, but don't delude yourselves into thinking that court is going to offer, a pot of gold, right? Like court is just.
Amen. It's like my blessing for every client that I have is that they understand that.
And people don't understand that. And a lot of lawyers, unfortunately, are pretty disrespectful of the mediation process. I'm very, very active in the American Bar Association dispute resolution section because I really want the idea of mediation to be elevated. So, because I think if the other professionals start to understand that it doesn't mean that it's going to be light and sloppy. Like I work with people who are multimillionaires who need to have an appraiser, a valuator, a CDFA, they need an accountant. It doesn't mean it's simple and easy, right? It just means that you're in charge of your own life. The judge I used to work for used to always say, you don't want this stranger in black robes deciding your life, right? And it's true.
Right. Well, and you feel like you've lost so much control to begin with in life at this point. Now you're handing over the decisions of how the rest of your life's going to look to somebody you don't know. And it depends sometimes on, did my attorney have a great day? And, the other thing I love about mediation is that there's reality testing. You say you want something. I want 100% custody. I don't want my kids with that person. Can you really see yourself being on 24/7 for the next 15 years till your kids are out of the house?
Well, you tell that to somebody who wants custody or doesn't trust their ex.
Yeah.
They can see themselves doing that. So the issue is also the judicial process is not what you may imagine. So the judge hears about this much. The things that matter to you may or may not be legally relevant. The judge, even though there are laws, there's a lot of opinion. The judge, you might remind the judge of somebody who broke up with them when they were a teenager. You might remind them of their brother who was always mean to them. The judge is just a person. So me going to court is the last ditch thing to do. Now, let's say you want to work things out well. You believe you can work things out well, but your ex just won't ever close the gap to get to the mediation table. You might have to file. After you file, you say, want to go to mediation? At that point, there's been a little fire lit under them, and they are losing the choice of whether or not they're getting divorced. And that's a great time to pivot into a mediation section.
Right. And, again, they control that. They retain control of decisions. They can always say no. You can't say that to that stranger sitting in front of you.
Well, you can. And also sometimes the judges can be pretty aggressive to the clients and to the lawyers. The judges can admonish you, and they can say, do you want your kids not showing up at your door in 20 years?
The other piece to that I think sometimes people don't always understand is they think the law is the law is the law. Okay, it's going to be whatever judge you get, you're going to get the same outcome. Yeah. And that's not the case. As you said, they're human. They have biases. They have bad days. They look at things and they might, as you said, get reminded, or they might have, a different thought in their mind. They might interpret your story, so to speak, the facts of what you're presenting in a vastly different way to you do, because everyone sees things from their perspective.
Exactly.
And so, so it comes back to a lot of that. But, in depending on your city, you could have 2, 3, 4 different judges having matrimonial cases in front of them, and you could get 2 or 3 different outcomes depending on which judge you go in front of. That's another thing you've got to kind of toss up when you decide how you're going to move forward.
And also, so sorry. So sometimes people come in and they tell me their story. I do 2-hour meetings, and I listen, and you could tell in their minds it's very complicated, and that's because the emotion is running so high. right?
Right.
So I haven't sorted out all the different things that Better Apart addresses and other resources can address. But from my perspective as a divorce mediator and a divorce lawyer, their case might be really simple, right? Like I simplify things. Like I have a lot of friends, obviously, who are divorce lawyers. And a friend of mine recently said, I could write down within a first hour of meeting somebody exactly what the outcome's going to be. And $300,000 later,
right.
and so she's got a lot of money, right? Whereas you can pay me $5,000 or $10,000 and get that outcome. So, it's really, it's also the reason I talk about mediation so much is because it's really hard to unsee and unhear all of the ugliness that happens in the courtroom.
Right.
So, the first really big number one tip that I give anyone going through a divorce, ready? Drum roll.
Yep. Get your notebook out.
A big step back is the great way forward to make a giant step forward.
It's so funny. I do that as well. I tell every client, I want you to step back and figure out what your priorities are. And then I'm going to work with you to prioritize, organize, and simplify so that when you go to mediation or wherever it ends up being, you know what to negotiate with. You know what you want. Everything else is kind of clutter. Don't get caught up in the stuff that you don't want, which is so important as well. And to your point as well, people complain divorce is so expensive, but when you spend $10,000 over a $5,000 item, yes, it's going to become very expensive. So
when you spend $100,000,
well, right. So sometimes, yes, every profession has good and bad. We got to be realistic with that. Sometimes attorneys do have a price tag or push it up a little bit, but it's equal or more that the people participating are the ones that are pushing that price tag up often as well. And they need to take and understand what their responsibilities are through the process. And we have to go to break because we're already over. I just looked at the clock and I didn't realize we've already gone through half this show, which is crazy. We will be right back. But before that, please, can you just share how people can get in touch with you, a quick, easy way? Because Gabrielle, they are going to want to learn more as they hear more. So.
Right up here, if you're on the screen, it's just www.gabriellehartley.com. That's the easiest thing, gabriellehartley.com.
Perfect. Thank you. We will be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am Hirsch, Serman, your host. We are here with Gabrielle Hartley. We are talking about the positive divorce movement. And I've been taking notes as we speak. As we've been speaking, I just want to recap some of the things because there's a lot of stuff. And I know I probably have not got it all down here. But we've been speaking about, obviously, this revolutionary new approach being a positive way and a deliberate way to go through your divorce, positive positive divorce movement. We spoke a little bit about the genesis of it. It's amazing to me how many professionals I'm meeting now versus 6-7 years ago who are in it because of the experience they had, whether it was as a child, whether it was they went through a divorce, whatever it might be, and how, collaboratively they're trying to change this traditional way of doing divorce, if I can call it that, which has generally been much more adversarial. And I love this coinage of the positive divorce movement, and we need to put more people under it and really get legs going with that. We spoke a little bit about the approaches. You can speak, you can negotiate, you can collaborate, you can go to court, some of the positives and negatives around those. A little bit about de-escalating, setting the expectations as you go into the process. And you had mentioned Better Apart, which we are going to definitely get to. And I will watch the clock a little bit better to make sure that we get the right amount. But I do want to ask just one quick thing before we start talking about some of that. You've dealt with hundreds of very high conflict divorces. They're not fun for the professionals as much as people think, oh, the professionals don't care. They do. But it's even less fun, quite honestly, for the couple going through this divorce. Can you share just a few tips on how to de-escalate that conflict, or, hopefully even move it towards a much more positive divorce and a positive experience?
So in order to de-escalate, the most important thing really is that you forgive yourself for staying in a situation that was not serving you for whatever amount of time that you stayed there. Because really, at the end of the day, your self-respect is the thing that tends to suffer the most. And then we lash out at the other person for making us small. But the truth is all of us, we allow ourselves to be treated in certain ways for whatever set of reasons. If you can do work with somebody to help you to strategize, to keep you on target. I know you were talking about a little while ago about simplifying what you want. A lot of what has to happen, though, is simplifying your relationship with that high conflict person. So that question is actually getting into the Better Apart approach, which, but before I do that, I also want to say that if you do find yourself in litigation, it is really important that you stay in your positive lane. Like, you don't go down that horrible road that is so easy to be led down. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't be upset, or that obviously it's natural to be depressed, upset, right, angry, want revenge. But just give yourself every day, a tiny little spot of time, 10 minutes, where you're just going to go for a brisk walk, talk to a friend who always makes you laugh, even when you're in a crappy mood, watch a stupid movie, whatever it is that's going to get you in a better mood. That friend who, I lost my father earlier this fall, and certain friends could just make me laugh hysterically, even if I was just crying 5 minutes earlier.
Right.
Do something for you that's going to make you feel good, and work on developing stronger boundaries, which is part of the Better Apart method. So,
it's interesting you say that, because I think self-care is huge, and it's one of the first things that goes when you're in such a stressful situation. Now, it didn't go for me. I never had self-care before I got divorced, to be quite honest. I was like, what is that hippie stuff you're talking about? Meditation, self-care? What are you talking about, right?
Go ahead.
When I went through, and I actually met people who encouraged me, and probably more than encouraged me, quite honestly, to get into that. It really changed the rest of the procedures, and even today, years and years later, how I'm feeling about everything, and how I move forward, and how I become more grounded, because it's so easy to lose your grounding in that. And so perfect intro, but can you talk a little bit more about the Better Apart program, the book, the program, your approach to it, and maybe even if you can hint at things that might be coming up with that later on. We'd love to hear from you about all of that.
Absolutely. So, the whole idea of self-care, yes, it does have to do with yoga and mindfulness and paying attention to how you feel. When we talk about mindfulness, let me just talk about that for 1 second. It's just about noticing how you feel in a moment. So you might notice that you feel agitated. And when you feel agitated, we don't want to feel agitated, so we lash out. But if you notice, every time I feel agitated, I lash out. Instead, you can replace the lashing out with something else. So I feel agitated. I take 5 deep breaths in through my nose and out through my mouth slowly. Then if I still feel agitated, I remove myself from the room, right? Because you have to do things that are going to support your well-being. So the better apart approach asks you to look at your life, and if you are so inclined, also to look at your spouse's life through these 5 lenses, which are patience, respect, peace, clarity, and forgiveness. Now, I could say so much about all these things, and I know we don't have too much time. So I'll just make a couple of key points. Number 1, boundaries are your friend. So that means if you're married to getting divorced from someone who harasses you, calls constantly, it's okay to turn off your ringer while you're at work, or to give them a different email account to respond to, or to use an online platform for all of your communication, like the FAIR co-parenting app or Our Family Wizard or something like that. It's really the right thing to do to care for yourself. Self-care is all about taking care of yourself, protecting yourself, right? So yes, yoga and meditation are great, but it's not because you're going to do a downward dog or warrior 1 and you're going to, feel great. It's really about being aware of how you feel. Now, why do you care about how they feel? Like, that person screwed you over. Why should you give a crap about, are they feeling impatient with the practice? So, who cares? But the reason you care is because you want a good resolution for yourself. Never mind for them. How are you going to get a good resolution for yourself? You're going to get a good resolution for yourself easily when you're able to meet their needs. So a really quick lesson on the close process.
Right.
When you're a divorce professional, or when you're getting divorced, you're looking to resolve your case, right?
Right.
And in order to resolve a case, you need to be clear on what the other person wants. We come into every conversation very positional. I want to keep the house. I need to have full custody, right? But what we really are negotiating is our interests, the why, right? So the why is because I feel insecure, because I feel anxious, because I'm afraid that he won't watch them well enough. Whatever your reasoning is, if you can address the why, right? If you can address the why, you're going to meet the interests or the needs. And once you address the other person's needs, you're more likely to have your needs met. So I didn't answer your question about better apart, but I just told you about those. So better apart is literally a roadmap to your recovery, your roadmap to how you can look at what you're going through step by step. It takes you through the financial crisis. It takes you through the co-parenting crisis. It takes you through how to tell people you're getting divorced, how to start dating, like the whole gamut, and what to do after 10 years after your divorce. It can really help you to recalibrate your entire relationship. The way you can access Better Apart is you can just buy the book online. That's really easy. I also have a downloadable coaching program. If you click on coaching on my website, you should be able to access that. And really, once you've read the book and you've integrated the procedures, I do work with people one-to-one. It is a bit pricey, which is why I have a downloadable program,
right.
Better than working one-to-one. But really, just read the book and find like a local divorce coach who's done my training. They're going to be able to really help you, and they're going to be a lot more affordable than I'm going to be. And they'll really help you to get through your divorce process using the Better Apart method. That's really what you want. If you're looking for someone who's been trained in the Better Apart method to coach you, contact me and I'll give you some names.
Wonderful. So, just a couple things that resonated with me on what you were speaking about there. One is when you're agitated, you're probably feeling that somewhere in your body, and that release, if I can call it that, of snapping at somebody, doesn't necessarily get rid of it. But I always say to people when they say, my spouse has given me an offer, and I say, okay, send me the offer, and I have them close their eyes and I read the offer to them and I watch their face, and I can see in their expressions what resonates well with them in that offer and what doesn't. Or I will say to them as well, as I'm reading this, pay attention to your body, because if something really doesn't sit well with you, you're going to feel it physically.
And then they have to ask themselves why they're feeling it.
Right. Well, that's the next step, is what is it that brought that feeling? Because, you know, the sentence before and the sentence after that didn't. But, you know, and it's something that takes a little time sometimes to really know what your body's telling you. But really, it's your emotions manifesting themselves in a physical way. And I think being able to, you know, go through a program like this, which lays out the groundwork, because some of it is just fear of the future. I don't know what's going to happen. So when you go through this offer, you still don't know what's going to happen, because that's a here and now offer, not, well, for 10 years this is happening, or, you know, looking forward. And I've said this on the show, I've said this to every client that I've had. Your divorce is the first chapter in the rest of your life. It's not the last chapter in this part of your life.
That's right.
And so being able to improve yourself, whether it's your self-care, whether it's your situation and know you're going to be taken care of, all of this is going to be speaking to you through your body as well. And I got to tell you, if my brothers heard me on the radio right now, they would be like, who is this guy? Because that's not how we grew up. I got to tell you.
I'm a family of all men, and it's the same, like, you know. But it's just really, I mean, your body will tell you everything.
Yeah.
Right? But just because something's upsetting you, and I say this because I have some pretty difficult cases where you might not just be getting upset because of the actual offer. It could be because of other things that don't feel fair to you, and you need to ask yourself why, and ask yourself to consider releasing some of those things some of the time. So it's complicated. It is not one size fits all. Some of the tips from the Better Apart method that I can share if we have time briefly.
We have a couple minutes, yeah, please.
So first of all, I'm just going to quickly run through the 5 elements. Patience is learning to respond rather than react, which is, you know, we could talk about that for an hour.
We can have a whole show on that, yes.
A whole show on that. So learning to respond rather than react, taking deep breaths is a great way to combat that, which we already talked about. So then peace. So that doesn't mean you're going to just get along so well and love each other. But it just means you can notice the neutral. You can build forward from, hey, thanks for showing up on time. Hey, got your check. Thank you. You know, just noticing when things are fine, because you're going to have complaints. And if people are, if you only voice your complaints, it's going to fall on deaf ears. People need to hear 8 to 10 positives in order to process one negative. Right. Think about that. And it might be hard to find real positives. So if you want a peaceful interaction, start with noticing the neutrals. So respect, self-respect is super important. You're not going to get anywhere without a big dose of self-respect. One way to start developing your self-respect when you're going through a divorce is to create not only boundaries, but also to create a daily practice of listing the people, places, and things that make you happier, because you need to really accentuate the positives and minimize the negatives. You'll start elevating how you feel about yourself. You know, shelving people who aren't serving you in a particular time. You don't need to stop talking to your mother or think your best friend's the worst person in the world because they're not being empathetic. You know, you're going through a trauma right now, and not everybody is equipped to handle other people's traumas who they love. So, you know, that brings us to forgiveness too. It's not just about forgiving your ex and forgiving yourself, forgiving everyone around you, because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Now, the most exciting part of the whole Better Apart process is the clarity section. And what clarity is about is it's all about moving away from the blame and leaning into what is your vision for the rest of your life. How are you going to make your life more beautiful, even though you've just endured and are continuing to endure this really unfavorable situation? And how are you going to express this vision? How are you going to bring it into your life? So I have something called the Youre protocol, which is quite literally, I do it with my arms, like visualize, get big, get granular, internalize, right? Bring it in, and then actualize. And that's, I'm showing your hands being released, right? So you extend up, you bring it in, and then you serve it out. Because when you have the vision of what you want to manifest, not to sound so woo-woo, manifest, whatever, I am a lawyer, right? Anyone listening who's a lawyer is like, what is she on? But, you know, you want to bring in what you want to create. You need to get very clear on what you want to create. And then as you bring it in and you get detailed, then you're going to get the steps that you need in order to make it actually happen. And then when you serve it at the table, you know, once you've done all the steps, it will just be there. So if you want a calm, happy life, picture it. Make it happen, right? Like I wanted to bring on the positive divorce movement and it was just an idea, right? I just like had an idea and then you just keep going with your idea. And so, you know, blame might feel good in order to overcome anger and sadness because it's protective in value, but over time, you're not going to need to hold on to that. So that's the thing to be careful of. Check in with yourself. Notice when you're living in that shame, anger, you know, depressed sort of spiral and cycle, and you can take action to start to feel better. So I hope I didn't go over in time.
No, we're doing well. We do have to wrap up, but I'm glad that you got that in because, you know, I think sometimes, especially when we're in this fog of emotion, as I call it, the problem is we can't see beyond the fog, right? And being able to have a roadmap, and sometimes it's, look, we're not going to cover that for 60 days, 90 days. That's fine, but we're going to get there. We're going to move you there. We're going to, you know, look beyond. Just knowing that somebody has that structure for you to get you through and beyond sometimes is amazing. And I want to thank you for the giveaway, that download. I want to encourage everybody listening to go get the book, to get the download. And I would say seek out anytime Gabrielle's being looked at or on a media outlet, please tune in because as you can tell, amazing information being given. So again, I highly encourage you, go to GabrielleHartley.com, excuse me again. That's GabrielleHartley.com. It's on the screen now. There's the download. There's a lot of information on there as well. And Gabrielle, thank you for shedding light on your insights on not an easy situation.
It's going to say sign up for the newsletter. That will actually trigger a download of the Survive and Thrive bundle.
Great.
At GabrielleHartley.com. And the book is now available in paperback, so that's exciting.
And don't forget, there's another one coming out. We'll have to have you on closer to that time, but it will be another, I'm sure, packed with a lot of great insights, just like the first one and just like this show has been. And I appreciate how you simplify such important ideas because that's not easy in itself, and that helps people, you know, when you can kind of break it down into an absorbable communication, not an easy feat under any circumstances. So thank you for that as well. I am Hirsch Serman, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Please reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. It's lifecycle.financial. You can reach out to me with questions or for Gabrielle Hartley. And again, you can go to GabrielleHartley.com. Our guest today, and I look forward to you joining me on the next show. And Gabrielle, thank you so much. Cece behind the scenes, thank you. I really appreciate both of you being here today and all that you've done and shared. Thank you.
Thank you.